This is proof of the next recession. Ah! Oh my goodness, it's coming. We have proof. We have proof. No, and no again. All right, so let's talk about the yield curve, my friends, and how the yield curve supposedly has proven 7 of the last 7 recessions, and how once you see how it did not, you'll want to take, and I don't have my weights up here, but a box of anvils and drop them on your head and jump in off the Empire State Building after slitting your wrists into a lake of starving infested sharks. All right, so I just can't take it. All right, so welcome to Heritage Wealth Planning, the place you come for reality based on the economic world as we see it. So let's dive into this. Don't forget to subscribe, thumbs up, smash the thumbs up button. I like saying that now. Smash it. All right, so here's something from Fidelity. I was actually surprised that this was actually as explicit as this is, and I don't know when they had written this. I don't know when they had written this article, but we're going to talk about the yield curve. People and I'm going to share with you. All right, just stick with me. People talk about interest rates going up and down as if all rates move together. The truth is, rates on bonds of different maturities behave quite independently of each other, with short-term rates and long-term rates often moving in opposite directions simultaneously. What's important is the overall pattern of interest rate movement and what it says about the future of the economy and Wall Street. Rates are like tea leaves, only much more reliable if you know how to read them. The yield curve is what economists use to capture the overall movement of interest rates, which are known as yield in Wall Street parlance. Plot today's yields for various maturities of U.S. Treasury bills and bonds on a graph, and you'll get today's yield curve. All right. Ordinarily, we're going to start with this one. Ordinarily, short-term bonds carry lower yields to reflect the fact that an investor's money is under less risk. The longer you tie up your cash, the theory goes, the more you should be rewarded for the risk you are taking. After all, who knows what's going to happen over the 3 decades, and that may affect the value of a 30-year bond. A normal yield curve, therefore, slopes gently upward as maturities lengthen and yields rise. From time to time, however, the yield curve twists itself into a few recognizable shapes, each of which signals a crucial but different turning point in the economy. When those shapes appear, it is time to alter your assumptions about economic growth. All right, so we're not going to talk about the normal curve. We're not going to talk about steep curve. We're going to talk about inverted curve. Dateline, August 1981. At first glance, an inverted yield curve seems like a paradox. Why would long-term investors settle for lower yields while short-term investors take so much risk? The answer is that long-term investors will settle for lower yields now if they think rates and the economy are going even lower in the future. They're betting that this is their chance to lock in rates before the bottom falls out. Our example comes from 1981. Earlier that year, Federal Reserve Chairman Paul Volcker had begun to lower the federal funds rate to forestall a slowing economy. Recession fears convinced bond traders that this was their last chance to lock in 10% yields for the next few years. As is usually the case, the collective market insight was right. Check out the GDP chart above. It aptly demonstrates just how bad things got. Interest rates fell dramatically for the next 5 years as the economy tanked. 30-year bonds went from 14 to 7%, while the short-term rates started much higher, fell from 15 to 5 or 6%. As for equities, the next year was brutal. Long-term investors who bought the 10% definitely had the last laugh. Inverted yield curves are rare. So this is a critical thing. Inverted yield curves are rare. Never ignore them. They are always followed by economic slowdown or economic or outright recession, as well as lower interest rates across the board. So remember that. Inverted yield curves are rare. Never ignore them. They are always followed by an economic slowdown or outright recession. Always. Really, Fidelity. All right. Now remember, we're talking about the yield. So back in 1981 and 1982, you could buy a short-term bond for 20%. That is true. In 1982, you could buy a long bond, the 30-year bond at 15 and a quarter. That is true. Who won that? Huh? Because the 30-year bond matured in 2011, guaranteeing you a 15 and a quarter return every single year by the feds. No risk, no muss, no fuss. 15 and a quarter. The short-term bonds, on the other hand, what they end up doing? Did you remember? They were paying, and we were into negative interest rate policy back in the 2008 and 9. NERP. And Europe was still doing that. They still might be doing it today. NERP, negative interest rate policy. Japan, negative interest rate policies. So the guys who owned, and the ladies who owned the long bond made out like a bandit. But again, our example comes from 1981. Recession fears convinced bond traders that this was their last chance to lock in 10% yields for the next few years. Not if you bought the long bond. It wasn't, because you were in hog heaven of getting that 15 and a quarter. All right, so now, again, let's go back to inverted yield curves are rare, and they always predict recessions. Let's take a look at our yield curve, shall we? All right, so here's our yield curve right now, and I didn't draw it, probably should have. But anyway, a 1 month yield is, and this is as of yesterday, 1 or 2 days ago. 1 month yield is 2.39. A 30 yield is 3.03. All right, so basically what we're seeing here is we have a gentle sloping, and this isn't, I mean, my goodness, you're basically saying I'll buy a 1 year bond for 2.5, and or I could buy a 30-year bond for 3. I mean, that's not much of a difference in terms of the yields. It's not. So some people say that's not an inverted yield curve. It's a flat, essentially flattened yield curve, and that predicts something. Actually, let's see what old Fidelity right here. Dateline, April 1989. To become inverted, the yield curve must pass through a period where long-term yields are the same as short-term yields. When that happens, the shape will appear to be flat, or more commonly, a little raised in the middle. Unfortunately, not all flapped or humped curves fall into the inverted curves. Otherwise, we all get rich plunking our savings down in 30-year bonds the second we saw the yield starting falling toward short-term levels. All right. On the other hand, you shouldn't discount a flat or humped yield curve because it doesn't guarantee a coming recession. The odds are still pretty good that economic slowdown and lower interest rates will follow a period of flattening yields. All right, let's take a look. All right, so we have a flattening yield curve. No one's going to argue this is not a flat yield curve. I mean, it's not across the board flat. It's pretty doggone close. And of course, we've been hearing for a long time, interest rates got to rise. All right, so now let's look now at the yield curve. Here is the... All right, so here's a historical 10-year, 2-year spread on the yield curve. An inverted yield curve has predicted the past 7 recessions. That's what Fidelity just told us too. All right, so let's take a look. I want to show you this one chart. All right, and here we talk about the Treasury yield curve, April 1984, and that's, look at that. We got a long bond back in 1984 paying about over 12.5, a short bond paying 10. All right, that makes sense. The longer you lock up your money, the more you're going to get for the longer time of locking up your money. But here we go with our chart. You ready? Historical 10-year, 2-year spread on Treasury yields. And we got in red. And it's an inverted yield curve has predicted the last 7 recessions. All right. So what we're going to see here is we're going to see this is 0 right here. And when it gets below this red line is when there's an inverted yield curve. All right. So we have an inverted yield curve right here. It gets the negative. That means it's inverted. And that was in 1978, inverted yield curve. When did we have our recession? Well, it didn't start till 1980. So basically from 1978 to 1980, we had 2 years where there was no recession. Interesting. Recession started here, all right, when the yield curve was not inverted. All right, so now we have an inverted yield curve right here. There was no recession, as you can see. We have an inverted yield curve. And then interest rates went back up. Now, it did stay under. It was inverted still going to 1981. And we had a recession from 1982, basically 1982, which cost Reagan his Senate majority. That's a fact. But you can see no recession. No recession. So, I mean... But it gets even better. All right, so yes, and then so we see these interest rates dropping off a bridge. That means, oh my goodness, it's an inverted yield curve. What happened from 1982 to 1999? All right, so I'm just curious. It predicted the recession. So it didn't, but let's just say it did. What happened from 1982 to 1989? From 1999. It was the biggest boom in the history of the world economically, without question. Better than the 50s. From 1982 to 1999, the market, because of Reagan and because of Clinton, I don't give George H.W. Bush any credit for that, but he did a transition to Clinton, and Clinton started off as a pretty left-wing guy, but then when the Republicans took over in 1994, they did meet in the middle. To Clinton's credit, he's a political genius. He wasn't an ideologue. Now he is, but he's got the money now to be. But back then he's a pragmatist for a liberal, and give Carter too. Carter gets a lot of slack, but he was a pragmatist. Even back then, Ted Kennedy was, believe it or not. They deregulated tons of things, but those days are gone. At the end of the day, though, political pragmatism. And Reagan, he raised taxes. He was signed the bill that raised Social Security taxes too. Reagan signed it. Again, at that point, Congress was controlled by Democrats, but it was Reagan's signature on the bill to raise taxes on Social Security, to raise taxes as well. I mean, these are facts. You can't argue with these. He was a pragmatist as well. And what we had from Clinton and Reagan and kind of meeting in the middle was a boom that we've never seen and may never see again. There's just no way around that. All right. So here's an inverted yield curve. When was this? 1989. No, this is May of 1989. And when did the recession hit? Let's see. That was June of 1990. So it took a full year. Did this really predict the recession? I would even argue not only did it not predict it, we had a non-inverted yield curve, because right now the spread was 0.08 between the 10 and the 2-year Treasury, which meant it was non-inverted, and that is when the recession hit. That didn't predict the recession. This didn't predict a recession. I mean, it's like they say economists have predicted economists have predicted 17 of the last 4 recessions. I mean, they just throw numbers out there as if like this is proof. All right. So again, inverted yield curve right there. You can see, did it predict a recession? No recession. Inverted yield curve. This was March 2000. No. And then finally right there, which was in 2001. And even that would be subject to some argument, but basically September 11th, 2001 was what really was the impetus of that recession from 2001 and 2002. So it wasn't in 2000. There was no recession in 2000. And yet in 2000, we had an inverted yield curve starting right there in 1999. I mean, let's see, right there. In January 2000, we started the track down an inverted yield curve, but we didn't get in a recession until another, 15 months later. And even that is somewhat subject to debate because no one knew we were in a recession, even in June in 2001. We didn't know that. Only after September 11th, 2001 was it made that we said, oh, yeah, we're in a recession. No one knew that back then. I mean, what I'm trying to say is no one knew we were in a recession here in 1990. No one knew that. No one said that we're in a recession. In hindsight, they knew it, but before they did not. And what you can see here, the inverted yield curve did not predict that. The inverted yield curve did not predict that. The inverted yield curve did not predict it. And here we go going forward. All right, this is in February 2006, inverted yield curve. We didn't get into recession until, let's see, what is that? Right there. February 2000. That's literally 2 years later. 2 years later. It did not predict the recession. For the love of me, man. And then, oh my goodness, look, interest rates are low. That means we're going to be a recession. Just stop. It's silly. This is silly that people say, look, I get it. People want a reason to be able to say this happened because of that. You cannot. In fact, I was just reading something just yesterday. Marijuana smokers tend to have higher testosterone. All right. So does that mean if you smoke marijuana, you'll have higher testosterone? Or does it mean if you have higher testosterone, you'll smoke marijuana? You see what I'm saying? So that people say, oh, marijuana, the people who smoke marijuana tend to have higher testosterone. Thus, we make this correlation that's simply not there. There is no there. I mean, maybe people who have higher testosterone are higher risk takers and thus more inclined to take risks and smoke dope. Huh? As opposed to being the correlation saying that, hey, if you have if you're a marijuana smoker, you're going to lead to a higher testosterone. No, it's almost like CO2 and global warming. Global warming, CO2 doesn't increase global warming. Global warming increases CO2. I mean, it's just Al Gore, it's just completely wrong on that. I mean, we know that CO2 happen after the temperatures rise. People who smoke dope after they have testosterone. They already have testosterone, then they smoke dope. CO2 rises after the temperature rises. These things there's no correlation here. Recessions happen has nothing to do with inverted yield curves. I mean, just look across the board. If Fidelity's saying it's crazy. And I don't understand why these people are I don't get it. It's not true. There's nothing there. Just look at it. For the love of me. And then you talk about too, you're like, okay, so what does this mean now? We have a 3% 30-year Treasury right now. Does that mean a recession is impending because we haven't had a Treasury this low for a while? I mean, no one knows what it means. We don't know. But the idea that interest rates have to go up, I've always challenged that. They don't have to go up at all. Interest rates go up when demand is lessened. That's all there is to it. That's when interest rates go up because people don't value the bond that's being issued by the government and there's less demand. As long as there's high demand for it, there'll be a lower interest rate. That's all there is to it. There's no reason for the feds now to loan out money at 5% or to give loans at 5% when they can get away with getting at 3%. Especially the fact I think it's right now, actually, our number two line item is interest expense in the federal budget. They're not going to start raising rates to 5% when they can get away with loaning you money at 3%. It doesn't make sense economically. It's just not practical. So stop paying attention to these people. It's nuts. I can't take it. I literally, the financial media is porn for people who are just nervous, negative Nellies. They're always looking for a correlation that does not exist. There is no there. It isn't. Markets are not rational. We can't predict them. We just don't know. So at the end of the day, if you're watching YouTube videos, reading the financial porn that's out there, and you're saying, oh my goodness, this means that, I would ask you to think again. There is no validity to any of this stuff whatsoever. And as you can see, just look right here. And then I'm still stunned that Fidelity said that. They said explicitly, inverted yield curves always, right there, inverted yield curves are always followed by economic slowdown. That's simply just not true. Oh, you know what? Don't tell anybody. Let me bring myself bigger. Don't tell anybody. Shh. The carrot industry is not going to want to hear this. Shh. Do you know if you eat carrots, you will die? If you eat carrots, you will die. Think about that, my friends. Think about that. There is 100% correlation between someone eating carrots and dying. Thus, you better not eat carrots. All right. So again, don't forget to subscribe down below. Smash the like button, comments, share the video, and we'll see you next time. Thanks, guys.